Okay, looks like we can begin. Got a good crowd here this morning. Thank y'all so much for being here and joining us today for this project development workshop. How's the audio doing? Can everybody hear me? I know I figured for me, y'all could probably hear me without the microphone, so those of y'all that know me. My name is Todd Thurber with LJA Engineering, and I am the subcommittee chairman for the ACE Houston Transportation Committee. I will be joined today by Mr. David Wurdlow from H-GAC and moderating this event. We are proud to partner with TxDOT, H-GAC, and ACE Houston in presenting this workshop to help local agencies and the consulting community weave its way through the federal, state, and MPO transportation project development process, and then bring projects forward successfully through the planning, permitting, funding, and letting for construction. This is the third workshop in the series. For those of y'all with good memory, if you remember, the first two of these were held back in 2014 in front of elected officials, agency staff, and consultants. A lot of y'all were here at that time. But it was for the consultants involved in executing this process of getting their projects on the tip. This workshop is going to be a little bit different. It will be geared towards, now that your project is on the tip, how do you actually get it to letting? We've got a great group of speakers this morning that are today that are leaders in each agency and are involved firsthand in the process in this region as well as statewide. The format of this workshop is going to be a little bit different than the previous one. We really want this to be interactive. So we really want to get y'all's input, questioning the speakers. So please engage the presenters as part of this during the, as part of the presentations and then during the breaks and afterwards. The key is that we want to go ahead and make sure that y'all get information that y'all can use moving forward. Please look at the agendas that were provided. What we're going to do today is have a single track in this room this morning with a break in between sessions, then lunch on your own. After lunch, our DE panel will begin at 1 o'clock, and then we'll have two separate technical tracks kind of based on y'all's desires and questions. So we'll break those out and have those in the two rooms back inside the district. After those tracks are done, many of us will still be around to mix and mingle and to be able to answer questions, and hopefully, obviously based on the traffic and Cinco de Mayo festivities, we hopefully y'all can come back in here and we can try and hash through some of these things and get some of your questions answered. H-GAC will be recording these proceedings, as you can see the cameras here, and they will be made available to attendees at a later date. In the future, we are also looking at holding some additional WebEx or video conferencing workshops on specific project subjects that are going to be discussed today, such as design standards or environmental procedures. One thing of note, if you are a PE and will need a certificate of attendance in order to claim your PDH credits, go ahead and just make sure that you get myself or one of the subcommittee members your business card, and I will then go and email you back a certificate in the next week or two. Before we begin though, I really would like to recognize our participating agencies, TxDOT, the Houston District in particular, for providing the staff and the time and providing this great venue for this event, and then H-GAC staff. Both of these agencies were really critical in initiating this effort several years ago and have coordinated the entire process for the team. I'd also like to thank the ACE subcommittee members and their companies who have helped underwrite the refreshments for the event. And those sponsors are LJA Engineering, Danabom Engineering, RPS Klotz, Jones & Carter, White Oak Engineers, IS Engineers, and iGet Services. Please go ahead and give a round of applause kind of in advance for all the presenters. What I'd like to now do is to introduce Chris Lindsay, the Executive Director of ACE Houston, just for a few opening comments.
Thank you, Todd, for everything. I am Chris Lindsay with ACE Houston. I'm the Executive Director for that organization. If you're not familiar with us, we are the engineering community here in terms of the consulting engineers. And so right now I have about 133 member companies that make up our organization. We've been around since 1978. We started off known as ACME, the Association of Consulting Municipal Engineers, and you can imagine all the little comments that were made about Acme Brick Company and Coyote and Road Runners and all that good stuff. So we've been around for a while. I've been with the organization for 17 years now, and it's a pleasure to be here. This is just a great group of people that have come out today, and hopefully you'll gain a lot of information as to how to make those projects go a little bit faster. And want to recognize Chris Cotter as our Transportation Committee Chair for our organization. Todd, of course, working in concert, and other members of our group to organize this. This is one of our major missions in our association, which is to try and make the business climate for our consulting engineers and their interaction with the public agencies to improve our processes, look at the design criteria, do all we can to make our projects move quicker, faster, smoother, on time and within budget. So it's great to be here for this event. But of course, this wouldn't occur without good public agencies and their willingness to work with us. And that is why we really appreciate the efforts that we receive from Houston-Galveston Area Council and from TxDOT. Without their willingness to work with us, these types of things couldn't happen. So again, glad you're all here. Hope you have a great day. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Quincy Allen as the district engineer for the Houston district.
Wow, what a great morning. We're so thankful you guys are here. And more than that, we're thankful for the partnerships we have here, not only with the governmental agencies, but with you, our consulting community. We're going to learn a lot today. I think the buzzwords are starting to come out all right, on time, on budget, right project, those sorts of things. Let's be efficient. Let's be effective. Folks, you're not an easy business. Nobody said this was easy, and we realize how hard you're working to deliver your projects. When things get a little bit off track, you know, we don't panic, we work together, we get them back on track. Okay, so we're here for that. I'd like to thank H-GAC and ACEC and the TxDOT folks that helped make this possible. David, Alan, Chris, we appreciate you guys very much. Also in attendance today, we've got a lot of TxDOT leadership here, not only Houston District, Bill Brudnick's here, I saw Pat Henry and his teams, many others. Dave Milliken from Local Projects Director in Austin, we're glad you're here. Our federal partners, Greg Punske. Greg, we appreciate you coming a long way for this meeting. Thank you very much, everyone. As soon as we start naming names, obviously I'm going to miss somebody, but if I did, I still want you to know you're appreciated. Thank you very much. Okay, let's talk about just a couple of ground rules for safety and things like that. We are not planning a fire drill today. If the alarm goes off, it's not a drill. We would like to gather everybody out here in a circle drive, get it far enough away from the building and out of the way of the fire trucks, because they'll be coming as the drill goes off. Okay, everybody clear? Just exit orderly. These doors will be open. You can come through this way, straight out the building. Most of you have found the restrooms. I hope that there's any question about that you'd ask. Just down the hall, the women's room is a little bit harder to find. You got to turn and go past the elevators and then make sort of a J turn there, and you'll be fine. If there is a medical emergency, okay, touch base with the guard, get them to dial 911 for you. All right. We've got a fire station right down the street with a population this big inside this building. Believe it or not, we use them once or twice a year. They know the way here. You will hear them very shortly after that call, and they'll get here in a hurry. If it's a significant emergency and we need to do first aid, the AED is down the hall, okay? Go past the restroom, look in the hall, there's a sign up on the wall. The AED is right above the copier. Just look for the sign in the hall and make a hard left there. For those of you who have been through a lot of first aid training, you know that AED has got recorded instructions on it, just to open it up and follow the instructions, okay? Some of you who are inclined or have had CPR training, if we're to that point, the main thing is compressions, okay? You guys didn't come here to get first aid training, but just start the compressions. You don't have to worry about breathing on them or anything else, just the compressions, all right? Then the AED will tell you how to do that, all right? So we haven't used the AED yet, but we have done compressions here. And with the population this big, it's just a matter of time, and so that's why we're spending a little extra time today. All righty. We've got an amazing agenda. You guys are going to learn a lot. We said before, the lunch break, there's lots of places in the area. If you just get out on the freeway, you go down the street, Jackson's down there, they get you in and out pretty well. Better than that, though, is our home team, TxDOT Cafe, just down the hall past the elevator. Miss Cleo and her team will be glad to fix you up something. They have steam tables and sandwiches and salads and that sort of thing. Find a place, get in, get nourished, and then get back here on time. Are there any questions that I can answer before we just really get rolling? Thank you again for being in attendance. Thank you for your partnership, and thank you for what you're doing for transportation.
Good morning, and thank you for being here today. I want to particularly thank the Texas Department of Transportation, the Houston District, for hosting this event. It's really critical that the partnership that you heard Quincy talking about, we love as planners to talk about how great everything's going to be when we get whatever project it is. None of that happens without you. You are the folks who make those dreams, those promises that we've made to the public a reality. You're the ones who are helping to save lives on the highway because we straightened out that curve, we eliminated a particular kind of a drainage problem or better lighting or reduce the congestion. None of those benefits occur, and that's what we want to be about. We want to be about showing those who are investing in all of us, giving us the resources to make these changes, the value that they're getting for that investment. And the Texas Transportation Commission has been a leader in stressing the idea that our decisions should be based upon performance outcomes. And what does that mean? It means that we get what we promised people, and were we able to do it on time, within the budget and the resources. Today you're going to be hearing a lot about ways that you can avoid problems. A little bit of prevention is worth a whole lot of cure, as they say. But you're also going to hear about the fact that we can't know everything. Every project is going to have its challenges. And how do you rely on your partnership and your relationship and your common understanding of the goals of a project to make sure that we manage to preserve the core of the value of that project when we're in some very difficult circumstances. So we understand the challenge. We appreciate you being here. Without you, none of these things happen. We appreciate our folks, partners at CEC. They've been tremendous through the years in helping us try to make your work just a little bit easier because we know how challenging it is. I hope you'll take a copy, if you haven't already gotten one, of our latest mobility report. You'll see big numbers on the inside, $17.3 billion over 10 years. Before Quincy wonders what hit us in the head, those are the all-in costs, as we like to describe it. But that's what the projects take to do when they're going to be done. And I think it's important to recognize that fantastic achievement. We have an unprecedented amount of support from the public, from our Texas legislature, and now we're excited to turn you all loose to help us get that job done. So thank you again for being here today. I'm going to ask David Wurdlow to come to the podium. We want to go right into our first session. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you again for being here. Thank you to our introduction from Chris and Alan and Quincy. Really appreciate their attendance here this morning and their dedication, demonstrating just how important this information and these issues are to everybody in our region. and doing a better job of delivering our projects. I'm going to introduce our panel in just a moment to lead off our session and our workshop day with you. But again, I think we covered all the safety stuff that we needed to. Quincy did a great job, so I don't have to cover any of the bathroom stuff. If you have any questions, just ask somebody that's up front, ask the security guard, they'll take care of you. Leading off our first session of the day, backs up just a little bit. So those of you that have a project already in the 10-year plan, hopefully you've already done this first session's material, but it'll be still very good for you to hear as you're teeing up the next projects and maybe backing up a little bit and fixing some of the problems that might still exist with your project. Obviously, the federal process poses many challenges to successful on-time and on-budget delivery. Beginning at the very beginning with project inception, a number of strategies can be employed to help ensure our projects are prepared to undergo that heightened level of scrutiny. And make sure that you as project sponsors are prepared to make better decisions when unanticipated challenges do arise, and they unfortunately will. I'm joined with a great panel here today, 3 individuals, Sue Theiss with TxDOT, Veda Montalbano, Consulting Community, and Greg Punske with Federal Highways. Sue Theiss is the Deputy Director for the Environmental Affairs Division in TxDOT over in Austin. She has 28 years of planning and consulting experience, last 11 of which with TxDOT. 7 here in the Houston District. Many of you remember you're here working with everyone here, Pat Henry's group. And the last 4 is Deputy Director over in Austin. In that role, she oversees TxDOT's environmental programs, and in particular, the assignment of NEPA responsibilities to TxDOT. That includes not just NEPA, but all environmental clearances. We're going to talk a little bit about that later and what the value of that has been to our state. Greg Punske joins us from Federal Highways. He is the district engineer for the south part of Texas here in our region. He's had 29 years with FHWA, and he's managed projects not just here in TxDOT, but North Carolina, Utah, Washington State, and in the District of Columbia. He's registered PE in North Carolina, and he's a grad from NC State and the University of Arizona. So I appreciate that, not from Texas, graduated from Florida State, so I appreciate that. Veda Montalbano brings likewise a similar amount of experience, nearly 30 years combined with the others in her firm across the project development cycle, beginning with the conception process of a project all the way through construction, with an emphasis on program management and the initial environmental documentation. She's worked on big projects here and small projects here in our region: I-10 Katy Freeway, 45 South, Hardy Toll Road, Beamer Road with the county, a variety of other projects with the city of Houston, and other major projects outside of our region as well. So if you wouldn't mind, welcome our panel. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to lead right in with Veda and that experience with a large number of projects. You can stay where you are if you want to. That'll be actually great. I'll ask the panelists that when they're speaking to punch the button to turn it on. It'll turn green. We'll try to only have one on at a time. So I'll just tee up with a question. You've been involved, obviously, in a large number of projects throughout the stages of development. Can you describe for us why it is really important to have a clear understanding of the need and purpose of a project? Why are you doing it? And what sort of risks that can really help us mitigate as we go forward? I'm going to tee up.
Good morning. Thank you, David. As David mentioned, I'm a project manager for over 30 years with TxDOT projects and local government projects, and I'm going to kick off the session just talking about the importance of project definition and the risk associated with projects. Successful projects begin with understanding the problems that you have on the project and the outcome, yet expected outcome, which is the purpose and need of the project definition. Just real quickly, I wanted to show a slide of an example project I worked on. It's almost like an English project assignment. You're looking at what are the problems on your existing project. Is there existing flooding out there? So that would be one of your needs or your problems. And the purpose of that would be, okay, we're going to propose drainage improvements to minimize the flooding. Is there congestion? The purpose then would be, okay, we're going to add capacity, look at traffic projections, see what we're going to need to meet the needs of that project and incorporate that into our scope and our purpose of our project. as well as bicycle and pedestrian accommodations. If it's a high developed area and there you see pedestrian paths, then you need to look at the accommodations that need to be provided in your project as well to serve the pedestrian and bicycle accommodations. And for the Gulf Coast region, a lot of times we need to also consider, is our project an evacuation route? This particular project was. So it was important to look at were additional capacity needs needed to facilitate hurricane evacuations, as well as added lanes, express lanes. So once you have your purpose and need, your project definition, you would look at your preliminary engineering team, and that's going to involve your environmental team working hand in hand with your design team early on to look at alternative solutions to solve your problems on your project, and looking at alternatives, and then the alternatives evaluation, the risk associated. We want to try to minimize those risks and challenges, so we'll look at community assessment impacts. You want to get the public buy-in early on your project and maintain throughout project development. Environmental clearance, you need to look at the constraints mapping early on when you're laying out your alternatives and try to minimize impacts to environmental constraints, especially if it's a 4F, a park, a cemetery, a hazmat site. You look at alternatives to which side of the right-of-way those are on. It might facilitate moving the alignment to one side versus both sides, looking at modifications to your typical section through tight areas and critical parcels along the project. So identifying those constraints and those parcels early is important. Railroad coordination is a long lead item. So if you have a railroad crossing or along the project, you need to identify that and start that communication with the railroad and identify what your solutions are going to be if you have a crossing. Grade separation needs. Right-of-way acquisition, you need to have, for all your alternatives, the existing right-of-way and then any proposed right-of-way footprint. That means looking at design cross-sections early on these alternatives, vertical, horizontal geometrics, and looking at the parcels that might be critical of displacement, try to minimize those residential areas, and look at the impacts and itemize those impacts for evaluation and determining the recommended alternative. Utility relocations is very critical early on. We need to do early coordination with the agencies, both public and private, to identify all the existing utilities within our corridor studies, and while we're laying out the alternatives and minimize those impacts, then quantify, coordinating with them, what would be the relocations if you can't avoid them, and so that information is evaluated in the alternatives analysis. Along with that, design criteria is always critical. You need to know your facility, what is the design criteria requirements. Later on in the panel, after the panels, they're going to go into details of how to find the design criteria, manuals, and guidelines through the toolkits for local government, environmental design. They're on the TxDOT website, and everything is pretty much laid out in a lot of the manuals that steps you through this. But you'll look at your facility criteria and what is it classified as, and that there's maps that'll tell you what that is. You look at the design speed that goes along with that facility and the design criteria, and you establish that in your design concept conference early on, and all your alternatives are designed based on that. And sometimes when you're going through this early on, you're working with the environmental group, you're able to identify early, is there going to be a need for a design exception to avoid a fatal flaw, such as a hazmat site or a cemetery. And in those cases, if you can identify it early, it saves you time later on of having to go back and redo the environmental document process, the public involvement, and changes in design. So it's critical to identify those design exceptions early and not be afraid to bring them up and discuss them with TxDOT and the environmental group and the planning group. And in the long run, it will save you some time. It may seem like you want to avoid them, but sometimes they make sense. And then the approvals for that, they all require TxDOT and federal highways approval when you have exceptions, and as well as the environmental document. You need to have time in your schedules and funds to coordination is key with all throughout the project development process with the agencies, as well as the review times involved and addressing the comments and documentation, QA/QC. These are all things that are critical and challenges that need to be managed throughout the project. From my experience, I'd like to bring up one of my projects actually had a lot of risks that were really not identified. You couldn't have identified until you got on the ground and started to do some environmental studies out in the field work. I picked up it was Beamer Road projects in South Houston. I picked it up after about 3 years in the environmental process. I worked with the Houston District staff and the division environmental group that were outstanding, working with the county to get that project moving. The environmental document had gone through multiple years of iterations. There were a lot of changes with the environmental criteria during that time, so that was part of it. It was evolving as the environmental requirements were evolving. And the project had limited access. There were a right of entry issues. So when I got the project, we had several parcels, major parcels that we were not previously had not been able to get access to. So early on, we worked that harder because the aerial mapping and the data just couldn't tell us everything we needed to know because it was through a new right-of-way extension or new alignment extension area. So once we were able to work with the developer and gain access, we hit the ground running on the environmental studies in the field, and we found an unmarked gravesite. We don't have those on databases, so it was a challenge right from the get-go. Public involvement had already gone through that. There was a recommended alternative, so we had to sit and work with the environmental division and TxDOT and decided that even though we were kind of gotten through a recommended alternative, it made sense to go ahead and try to move the alignment out of the way of them unmarked gravesite to keep the project moving. So in doing that, we realigned the project, and that's something that if you look at the alternatives early and you try to get all your data, it'll save you time later on because you don't want to get into design and find these types of problems. So we were lucky there, and we were able to, because of the alignment change, we did need another public meeting to get public buy-in, and we were successful, and we were able to eliminate that fatal flaw and get the environmental document approved. Another issue on this project, we had multiple pipelines. There was an oil and gas field adjacent, so we had oil, gas wells, pipeline gathering lines, parallel lines that all needed to be looked at, and there were some places where we did modify the typical section to minimize that right-of-way impact of impacting those facilities. In addition, we also have a Superfund site along one side of the right-of-way. So, avoidance of right-of-way on that side was good, but we also needed to coordinate with EPA and the Superfund manager to find out what's going on underground with the contaminant. Well, the groundwater had been contaminated, so there was a groundwater plume that also was reaching into pretty close to the existing right-of-way, and at the intersection where we were wanting to put in some corner clips, we had to make some more modifications just to avoid that completely. You have to worry about that when you're looking at drill shafts for bridges or for lighting or traffic signals. You don't want to puncture through a contaminated groundwater plume and spread that contamination. So that's just some lessons learned. There were many more issues on the projects I've been involved in, but that kind of sums up importance of that early coordination with the environmental group and the design group and alternatives.
Thanks, Veda. Wow, I think we hit every other session in today's agenda. Hopefully that's a good indicator that paying attention at the very beginning to what are you trying to accomplish with your project, what might stand in your way, can really pay some dividends as you start dealing with some of these challenging technical engineering issues, environmental concerns, working with the public. All of it kind of comes up if you don't have a clear idea on the front end, and that moves around, you're going to have challenges working through the rest of those problems. To that event, so you've spent the last 4 years working on NEPA assignment, taking that over from Federal Highways. As part of that, TxDOT's been very clear about putting some policies and toolkits, additional resources in place to be very cognizant about scoping, in particular for the environmental process. Can you spend a minute and really talk about what the benefits have been for TxDOT out of that process and how you see that going forward and how we can confer that beyond maybe just TxDOT projects to the local government projects as well?
Absolutely. Excellent. Hi, good morning. Thank you for having us here. We really appreciate it. It's been a couple years since we've done one of these events, and we're happy to see you all. Thank you for coming, taking your Friday Cinco de Mayo and coming here. First, I've been involved in the NEPA assignment project now for about 4 or 5 years. It was a long process to get to the point where we're at, and it involved a lot of coordination with Federal Highways. We had a team of Federal Highway people from both the Austin Division,
the Texas division that's in Austin and Washington DC, working with us on coming up with our plan and our application. And it was quite a involved process, but in taking over the program, we needed to put together a lot of tools, and one of the tools we put together was for scoping. Scoping is a very important process. As Veda said, if you start out in the beginning and know what your parameters are for your project, your characteristics, it helps you to define what studies you need, what the timelines you need. If you have, if you need extra studies, if you need coordination with the railroads, if you need coordination with agencies like the Corps or U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, it's good to know these things up front. So one of the tools that was developed as part of the assemblage of lots of tools that you'll see on the website for environmental things is the scope development tool. And how many in the room have actually used the scope development tool? Not many. Okay, so that's good. This is new news for some of you. You can access it on the TxDOT.gov, the Environmental Division website, and you look under, you can actually Google environmental toolkits and look under environmental process, and you'll find the scope development tool. And what it is an interactive tool that you can put in characteristics from your project. Like if you're going from a 2-lane to a 4-lane, if you've got wetlands, floodplains, if you have endangered species, all these different things that go into assessing what kind of studies you're going to need for environmental. And then it spits out some answers at the end. So it says, oh, you need public involvement, you're going to need noise studies, you're going to need to coordinate with certain agencies. Or it might say, you don't have to do any of this stuff. We're not going to have to right away, we're not expanding capacity, so you don't need to do a noise study, and you don't need to do maybe archaeology. You may not have to go out and dig in the ground looking for artifacts. So it's good to know what you need to do, and it's good to know what you don't need to do. So when you're talking to your consultant or you're preparing the documents yourself, you don't overdo stuff and do things you don't need to do. It'll save you time, it'll save you money. So that's probably one of the really, really most exciting tools that have come out of NEPA assignment is the scope development tool. I think it's very helpful. Our staff at TxDOT love it. We've incorporated actually into an internal program also, so we've got the external one that y'all can use. We've got an internal one that we're required to use on categorical solutions. It's just really, really helpful just to make sure you don't miss anything. Because if, say for instance, you're doing a project and you think you're good to go and you're down, you know, on the, would it be the 90-yard line for a touchdown, right? Okay. I should know this, but I don't. Okay, so you're right there. You're like in the goal area. Yeah, you're in the goal area, and all of a sudden you find out you got a blind salamander. You are screwed, because now, if you didn't know this 2 years ago, you have to work with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service can be a bit challenging. They're not particularly fast at doing things, and it takes lots of studies, and. For instance, we have a project in Austin that's intersection improvement, putting in an overpass, upgrading the intersection. And you wouldn't think that would be a big deal. You know, the traffic comes off of, you know, a freeway, and all of a sudden it stops at a stoplight, and then there's another stoplight. So what do you want to do? You want to get that traffic moving, because at the end of the day you want to go home. At the beginning of the day, your coffee's already cold. You don't want to wait through those stoplights. Well, we've got a biological evaluation assessment that has been sitting at U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service since October. So if you were in the end zone and you were looking at letting the project in January, not happening yet. So that's some of the importance of looking at all the things that go into environmental, and you always start it by the scoping process. So I'm going to lead into NEPA assignment for a quick moment, because that's been my, well, the vein of my life for the last several years. The vein of my life. Yeah, it's been something. Anyway, so if you don't know this, any project that requires federal funding or federal approval, has to go through the NEPA process. NEPA is the National Environmental Policy Act. It was approved in 1969, and what it requires is federal agencies to look at projects to see what the potential environmental impacts are. It doesn't mean you have to pick the least damaging one. It just wants your approval to know what the possible problems that could be in picking certain alignments or certain projects. So it's an information thing. So it's a public information, it's a agency information kind of a process. And in December 16, 2014, TxDOT was authorized through an MOU by Federal Highways to take over the approval process for NEPA projects. So you're talking EAs, EISs, and CEs. And so if you're interested, if you're wondering what this graph is behind me, what it's showing, part of what we do as far as NEPA assignment is we're tracking the time it takes to get certain things done. So EAs, CEs, EISs, it's part of, in our MOU, it's part of the requirements that we have for our metrics. And the whole purpose of NEPA assignment is to reduce the time frame for getting project approvals, environmental project approvals. So if you're doing environmental work pre-assignment, and you're not real familiar with the process, but the way it went was the local agency would give your environmental documentation to your district, and you'd go back and forth on comments and revisions. Then when the district was happy with it, they would go to the environmental division in Austin, where I am now, and then it would go back and forth between the division, district, local jurisdiction, consultants. You do this back and forth thing. And then when EV was happy with it, it would go to Federal Highways, and then you would once again do this back and forth thing. So NEPA assignment took out, sorry Rick, that last third of the process. So now things get approved either at EMV or at the district rather than sending it all over to Federal Highways. So Federal Highways staff can move on to bigger and better things than doing NEPA work. So what the graph is showing is part of our metrics is we pulled environmental assessments from about the 4 years prior to NEPA assignment to see how long it took from the project start to completion, to a FHWA, which is your environmental approval of an environmental assessment. So in about those 3 or 4 years, we had 54 projects that were approved throughout the state with an average time frame of 1,060 days. Now what the purple and the orange bars show is after NEPA assignment. So after December 2014, these are the environmental assessments that have been approved that both started and were completed after December 2014. So it's not including the ones that started pre-assignment, so the ones that started 2010, 2012, 2013, it doesn't count those. It just counts the ones that started post-assignment. So EMV, the TxDOT, the orange bar, we've got 14 EAs that have been approved since assignment with an average days for completion, from start to completion, of 515 days. Now, for local government projects, which we pulled out of this set, we've actually only got one project that was both begun, started, and ended during the assignment period. So it's not like you can have an average of one. You have one. So we have one that lasted 791 days. It was a project down in FAR. So that's the only project so far that's been completed under assignment for local government projects. Now, this afternoon, there's going to be an environmental session talking about getting your project approved. So it's Christine Berger's session. So we highly recommend, if you're interested in the environmental stuff and getting your projects through, you attend that course. And that's what I've got.
Thanks, Sue. This is, I think, a very useful illustration of what we're talking about. I think you easily pick up the difference in, you know, when we eliminate that extra layer of review and back and forth, right? We clearly chop a bunch of time off. Oops. I think Greg is smiling actually here. I don't think he's upset about this. Could you punch your microphone off? There we go. Okay. But I did want to make sure that we kind of highlight Sue. I think it'll be useful to see as we get more projects coming in, local projects under assignment, to see if we still see that gap between TxDOT and local projects. And that's where I see the tools that you guys are using rigorously from the very beginning of the process. There could be some value for the local governments being just as cognizant of that on the front end, that we might be able to chop some more time off of the local government projects as well. So, Greg, I do want to tee up, give you an opportunity to talk about these types of issues, scoping and risk management in particular from the federal perspective. We've obviously been working closely with TxDOT through the assignment process on that. Do you have some other examples you might bring up that might be useful for us and the benefits we might see?
Sure. First of all, just to tag on to Sue's, I'm a district engineer. NEPA and environmental was something that we had to do to get through. I was more than happy when TxDOT raised their hand and said, we would like to take over the NEPA. And I'm thankful that they did. It's been a couple of years since I've been in the NEPA, but I worked on some small projects here, the Grand Parkway, legacy project in Utah, if anybody's heard about that. Some of the nationally significant projects that took years and years to get done. And I know that Grand Parkway, I'm going to talk to you about risk, and risk is uncertainty, and it really is from your perspective when we talk about risk, those are those uncertainties that will have an effect on our objectives. And I think it depends on where you're sitting. I'm sure from your perspective, the risk is having the federal government involved in your project, right? Going through those federal regulations. That's the risk from your perspective. From Federal Highway's perspective, our perception of risk is ensuring that all the federal aid requirements are completed. And unfortunately, TxDOT sits in the middle of this, unfortunately for them. So they're sitting there and they're required to ensure that those federal requirements are fulfilled and to work with the local governments to ensure they get fulfilled. So they're kind of sandwiched in between, and that's by design. That's what the federal laws require. Only a statewide agency can take the funds, and then their sub-recipients are our local governments. Few exceptions, Tiger projects, direct grants. There are a few projects that are a little bit different. So risk is the effect of uncertainty on our objectives. So, and I think we can all agree the effect that the objective that we're looking at is a successful project delivery. So what we want to do is manage that risk. And so in doing that, we're going to need to focus our resources, strengthen our management programs, and improve communication. So that, I think in a nutshell, that's what we've got to do. It's easy to say, but it's hard to get your arms around. And then there's uncertainties that we don't know about and we can't prepare for. The litigation that happens on projects that we didn't expect to. Unforeseen environmental resources that might be within our project footprint that we weren't aware of. So I think you've heard it twice already today. You're going to hear it again. The key to managing risk and getting the project through as effective and efficiently as we can is to front load our resources. And that's going to require that we develop a process to identify and address the risk issues. So in doing that, we're going to have to look at the cost, schedule, technical, the context, and the financing for the project. We're going to have to look at that whole project. But it's really going to start, again, at the purpose and need. And before we get too far along the project, we need to figure out what the need is that we're going to solve rather than defining the scope up front. And I think we run into a lot of problems when we say we want a 4-lane X highway without looking at maybe what is the problem that we're trying to solve. Is it congestion? If it is congestion, how are we defining that? Are we looking at travel times? Are we looking at levels of service? What is it and how do we define that up front to get to the project that will solve that? If we can do that up front and we can get that project definition project scope and definition into the long-range plan and then into the transportation improvement program at the MPO, we're halfway there. That will be the groundwork or the foundation for the environmental document that will carry us hopefully through that first phase of engineering, whatever, NEPA, whatever you want to call that, get us to design and right away to construction. That's our ultimate goal, is to get the project to construction. So a clearly defined purpose statement needs to be done. We need to assemble the correct team to address those. Once we've got the scope, maybe we've taken a look at the tip, then we need to take a look at the critical issues, the technical issues, the environment, the design, the cost. Then we need to develop or gather, assemble the correct team, the correct disciplines, and make sure that they have the authority and the control and any additional resources that we might need. And up front, some projects we know we're going to have litigation, and that's when it's a wise thing to do to go ahead and contact the legal department, make sure that as we're developing the project, we get those, we get that input. They don't approve it. They provide guidance to us. They provide counsel, but sometimes it's good to have that extra look at those. Then we develop the project phases, look at the project budget, cost, and then ensure that we have project reporting and tracking. And then we want to make sure we get stakeholder input on that. So that's kind of the broad brush of the risk management process. But in looking at that, some of the things that can really help improve our efficiency is to ensure that when we assemble our team, and if we're going to use consultants, that we have a quality management plan to ensure that we identify the requirements of any environmental document or any thing that we're going to prepare, and that we clearly define what those are, and then there is a method that the consultant will have to ensure that we're getting a quality product. We do that normally with project plans. We haven't pushed that back up into the environmental process, and I think that that's something that we could really help ourselves out if we started looking at that in our RFP. So that covers everything I had.
Thank you very much, Greg. I think that's very helpful to see the federal perspective on this. You mentioned team building and making sure you've got the right folks involved up front to help you really manage the process for the overall project. You brought litigation as an interesting issue that sometimes going in that might be an issue that you've got to manage and prepare for. Do you guys, looking through that panel as well, if there's some examples you might think of that were out of the box that were things that really worked well because you identified that issue up front and were able to manage it with the team from the beginning versus or maybe a bad example where you didn't and you could have, but any examples from Veda or Sue on that?
Well, we were pretty sure on Grand Parkway that at least one of the segments would get a lawsuit, and we did. And we won, for that matter. So we did do a really thorough job of making sure we had all of our I's dotted and T's crossed, making sure we looked at every aspect in all different ways. Because when you're a planner, you learn to look at alternatives. You learn to look from your side, from the community side, from the agency side, just to make sure you've got all your bases covered. So if the threat of litigation happens, you're prepared. And with Grand Parkway, we were prepared. We had good documents, and we established a good file in the beginning, knowing that we might end up in litigation. And then Greg and I spent many days and days with some other folks going through the file, getting ready for what ended up being a successful project. It's on the ground, and probably a lot of you have driven it now, so we're very excited about that. It was definitely a success story.
Veda, any thoughts?
I kind of actually, I think I worked a little bit with that, possibly. I know we had some developments that we realigned around to minimize impact to some homes, and that was on Grand Parkway. worked with the Houston District a little bit on some of those alternatives, but I was not in the weeds of, you know, looking at the environmental documentation of all the alternatives analysis and the backup that you need to have your files, so that they can stand up in court. And that's important through the project development phase, as Sue said, and that's why they were able to be successful. So.
Thank you. I did notice when Veda asked people to raise their hands, not many folks had been to TxDOT's websites or indicated they'd used some of the toolkits. So I did want to take the opportunity to go to the website and ask somebody to drive me so you all know where to go find some of these resources, at least as a starting point. All right, so if I'm on TxDOT's main webpage, where do I go now?
The checklist and the best management practices is great. It's in the appendix in the back. And there's some flow charts in there as well that'll guide you through all the entire process from initiation through construction. And all the requirements, the checklist, I mean, agenda, examples for kickoff meetings, pre-bid meetings, pre-construction meetings, everything's there. You don't have to invent anything. It just guides you through the process.
And Sue, you mentioned the scoping checklist.
Yeah.
Is that here? Can I get to it from here, or do I have to
I
go
don't know
back
how to get to it from there. Actually, if you go to Google, you know, they've redesigned the TxDOT website over and over, and I still can't find things on it. So I would go to Google, because that's the way I know how to do it, and that's the way I do it. It's bookmarked on my computer. I don't know if you can get there from there, but. And you can type in TxDOT environmental toolkits.
It wasn't the first tip.
Yeah, environmental compliance toolkits. See, Google's awesome. I love it. What do we do without Google? You know, we had encyclopedias. I told my son what a card catalog was the other day. Wow, life has changed in the last couple decades. So there we go. Those are all the environmental toolkits. And since assignment, we were tasked to come up with processes, manuals, guidance, forms, anything you can think of to get projects through the system, environmentally. I'm speaking environmentally. I'm not the engineer person at all. I don't do math. And what we came up with were a ton of toolkits, and the goal is to make sure that we have consistency across the state. So if you're doing a project in El Paso, in Pharr, in Lubbock, in Austin, in Beaumont, in Houston, everybody's got the same parameters to start with. So hopefully you end up with the same type of document at the end, or you've gone through the right process. So a lot of the CE stuff is going to be under that National Environmental Policy Act and project development. You're going to find things for CEs, you're going to find scoping. So if you look under, wow, yeah, but there it is, scope development. Yep, right there. And it'll take you to instructions for using the scope development tool and the scope development tool. They're right there on the top. And that is what you need to use if you're starting to look at a project. And you can do this on your own. It's not difficult. You do need some basic information. Are you going to go through a floodplain? Do you think you have any endangered species? If you don't know, you answer you don't know. And it'll spit out and say, well, you need to do more studies to figure out if you do or you don't. But you know, if you're just thinking about, hey, I want to do a project here, I wonder what I'm going to have to do to get there, to get to the end product, you can go through that tool. And it's interactive, so if you say there's no floodplains, it won't ask you any more floodplain questions. If you say there's wetlands, it'll ask you more questions. If you say there's no more right-of-way, it takes away questions. If you are adding right-of-way, it adds questions. So, you know, so say you're adding right-of-way, it'll insert things like you're going to need archaeology, you're going to need public involvement, you're going to need different coordinations. So it's really been an exciting tool that we released about a year and a half ago. And we released it and showed everybody at the environmental conference. So I don't know if anybody of y'all been, I'm gonna need a plug. We've got an environmental conference every year. It's in September, and this year it's going to be in Austin. So it's centrally located for people to attend. And we encourage local governments and agencies. It's open to agencies, local governments, state, federal, to attend. And one of the things that we showed last year was using the scope development tool and how it goes through. And if you have any questions, you can always call somebody at TxDOT to help you through the process, but it should be pretty self-evident when you actually just get in there. The directions are pretty clear, so it's awesome.
Great. Thank you, guys. I want to recognize we did start our session on time. I want to make sure we move to our next session on time, but we do have time for 1 or 2 questions. Does anybody have something that's really burning that they would like the panel to address? Crickets.
Then we did good.
You did a great job, guys. No questions at all.
Can I just,
Yeah.
you know, while TxDOT did pick up the NEPA process, the planning process unfortunately stayed with Federal Highways. And I don't know how involved y'all have been in that, but we do see a couple of stumbling blocks if a project scope or description changes between the time it's put on the MPO's long-range plan and the time it goes to construction. So, you know, that is one of the key checkpoints, is that if you see your project evolving and it becomes, you know, originally you were thinking it was a operational improvement, an intersection improvement that could use CMAQ funds for air quality improvement, but now it's adding capacity. You know, you need to talk to your MPO and you need to talk to TxDOT about, you know, is that project still consistent? The one that you want to let, that you've been working on for 3 years, is that still consistent with the long-range plan and the TIP and the STIP? Because we are seeing problems when those projects that have been a lot of energy, a lot of money has been sunk into, and then we need to back up and revise the long-range plan and make sure that if it's in a conforming area, that the opening date is the same as the conformity date in the long-range plan. So there are some checks. I guess what I'm trying to tell you is the communication is really key to successful implementation. So talk to your district, talk to your local government representatives. I know that I'm going to put in a plug for the next segment. We've worked with Dave Milliken and the local governments group for a long time. They have an excellent website as well that I'm sure he's going to show you. And they have a lot of practical handbooks and workbooks to help the local governments push through some of the federal requirements. And but also, you know, at the end, Federal Highways is a public servant. We're here to deliver projects, and if you need help, you know, certainly call my office or call the Texas division and get some help from us. We work in conjunction with TxDOT, but sometimes there are some questions that you might want to ask us. So we're open to that as well. We recommend you go through TxDOT and the Texas division, but if you need some help, we can always facilitate that.
I believe the catchphrase is "every day counts."
That's right. Every day does count.
Yeah. Not seeing any questions, I'll let the next panel start to come up, so make sure we stay on schedule and get through the rest of our agenda today. Thank you very much.